My name is Carol Spencer, and I was a Barbie designer for well over 35 years. I found in Women's Wear Daily a blind ad that I knew had to be for Barbie, and I applied for that in November of 1962. But no one answered me. The lease was up on my apartment in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I decided I'd had enough of their cold weather. I just decided I would move to California, come hell or high water. I ended up with 2 flat tires in Amarillo, Texas, 2 more in Alamogordo, New Mexico, and a hole in my muffler in the Green Mountains. And when I got to California, I started applying at jobs. And then lo and behold, California Apparel News had an advertisement seeking a designer for the Barbie doll. Same requirements, so I applied again. This time I got an answer, and I got the job. Ruth Handler, her plan for the Barbie doll was to have fashions that are understandable to a child so that the child could create their own dreams while playing with the doll. The Barbie doll was patterned after a fashion model of the 50s. We always tried to make her clothing as realistic as possible, not exaggerated, not what you might call doll clothes. We used the proportions of her face to the proportions of a person's face and then how the garment would fall on the person. But we tried to replicate what was happening. It could be high fashion, it could be general fashion, it could be street fashion. The 1950s taught us that a fashion illustration would be 3 heads to the waist. I personally had a 16-inch waist back when I started with Barbie, so her tiny waist and her figure never bothered me, although many people started worrying about Barbie as not having a real figure, but frankly, I was designing for a doll that was a teenage fashion model and not necessarily a real live person. I fell in love with the Barbie doll when I first started. I find myself thinking of her as my muse, the little gal that's always on my shoulder, but you can't really see her because I don't have one sitting there. My first design was crisp and cool, and that was just a simple little sleeveless white top with red stitching and buttons and a little polka dot scarf and a red skirt. Once the product is designed, it would be perhaps a week by the time the design was finalized, but you weren't working on one. I was working on more than one at a time. Then they would line all the dolls up in a row. They would start choosing for the line. They would child test to see what the local children thought. Then the pattern is transferred to a development where they make the final pattern. From start to having it on the sales shelf, it's either 12 months or 18 months. In some of our child tests, we found that no matter what the ethnicity, they look at the doll through a certain type of eye and they see themselves in the doll. Let's face it, you don't put out a doll that nobody's going to buy. So it has to do with the acceptance of the population. She represents fashion through the ages, starting in 1959, all the way up through today, and I'm sure that she's going to go on for a great many more years. Barbie represents our interests, what we have done. She is really a large part of the history of the culture of the United States.